This might sound bizarre, unreasonably optimistic, but I don't think Star Wars is quite finished with the character of Marrok. Don't get me wrong, he's dead. He was used by Morgan Elsbeth and revived with Nightsister Magick. But once upon a time, he was an Inquisitor hunting for Darth Vader. The assumption was that he was an Inquisitor who survived the events of Return of the Jedi. And even though the databank says Morgan Elsbeth hired him, I think it's far more probable he was a normal Inquisitor killed during the reign of the Empire, whose body was discovered and resurrected by Morgan, although some believe that Marrok might have been a Knight's brother. And we had so many fan theories, there was so much speculation about this character, so much which has aged like milk, because we overhyped his importance. But he was just a plot device. Or was he? And here we get to the heart of my video. Today, I'm going to make the case that Marrok's backstory before the events of Ahsoka Season 1, and how important he may have been to Vader and the Empire, is not negated by his somewhat unsatisfying death in the Forest of Cetos. And I'm going to show you how Dave Filoni may have created this character to be special, just not in the way you might think. And there are 3 ways they can explore his backstory: as another Inquisitor, in Tales of the Jedi Season 2, perhaps in the Bad Batch Season 3, or, less likely but would be insane, Andor Season 2. And I know, they're not trying to deal with Force users in that show, but it's still pre-Episode 4. All of the Inquisitors were more or less dead by the time of A New Hope. So sit back, relax, grab your favourite beverage, do whatever you need to do. I want to do a deep dive into Marrok and his importance in relation to the Inquisitorious. My theory relies on an observation. Marrok's story parallels that of Boba Fett in the original trilogy, a character who was famous for his design, his armour, his badassery, with very few lines.
He's no good to me dead.
But then suddenly died after very little screen time. In the case of Boba, he makes appearances in The Empire Strikes Back, and then dies in the Sarlacc pit in Return of the Jedi. Initially, fans didn't get much screen time with him, and then 2 decades later, George Lucas decides to explore his backstory in Attack of the Clones, in some books and comics, and then the Clone Wars series. And suddenly, this character is given humanity and depth. And then fast forward to 2021, and Disney confirm he survived his fall, and so were rendered with a fuller picture of this character, who was once an action figure character, nothing more than a plot device, a bad guy bounty hunter, and all of a sudden, we perceive him in a novel and beneficial way. Who's to say Marrok cannot receive the same treatment? I know it might be wishful thinking, but the parallels are there. They should do more in an earlier time period, even if it's just in a book. Marrok and Boba Fett follow the same Star Wars pattern, one which has been fundamental to the franchise, that we even see with the likes of the Knights of Ren in the Star Wars comics. They didn't do much in the sequel trilogy, but earlier time periods in the Kira comic trilogy have given them a lot more weight, a lot more significance. Marrok and Boba started out in the same way, characters with very little dialogue, and simply had a very cool look, both mercenaries for the Empire and the Remnants respectively, and just as Dave Filoni has stated about his characters in the Clone Wars and Rebels, but the same applies to Ahsoka because he wrote it as well, nothing is thrown in for the sake of it. He returns to plot threads, characters, and expands on why he included them. I made the same statement about the Bad Batch with the character of Roland Durand. Mark my words, he'll be back for the 3rd season of the Bad Batch, I'm sure of it. So on some level, we must reason there is more to this character in their past. The members of the Inquisitorious have always been fascinating every time they appear, but what was so interesting about Marrok in the Ahsoka show is that he was an Inquisitor who seemingly survived the events of the original trilogy. That's why the reveal that he was just reanimated was so disappointing, because it was a wasted opportunity to tell one of the best stories of a group of Force wielders who already captivates the fandom's imagination. I would have loved a backstory like Baylan, and was still a person under that suit, and not just a zombie. If I were Lucasfilm, I would have killed him off in Season 2, or Dave's film. Just keep this character's story going. According to the reference book Star Wars: The Secrets of the Jedi, the Inquisitorious became obsolete by the time of A New Hope, and Star Wars fans had always imagined there might have been 1 or 2 survivors, which is what we thought Marrok was going to be, perhaps a secret apprentice to Lord Vader. On top of their purpose becoming obsolete, as more and more Jedi were killed off, the dwindling numbers of Inquisitors may have also been a contributing factor to the end of their group. However, the fates of the 3rd brother, Reva the 3rd sister, and the 4th sister are still unconfirmed. The latter story of the unknown fourth sister could be explored in the second season of Kenobi. But did you know, the rebel commander Lena Graf once impersonated the fourth sister by wearing her armor in the issue Return to Vader's Castle number 4 by Kevin Scott. This indicates Graf may have killed the Inquisitor, but as I say, it's very ambiguous, and in the future they may decide to retcon that comic. But if any Inquisitors did survive into the era that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are exploring, then it makes sense the Remnant Shadow Council, including Thrawn, wants to know about them and use them as a force-wielding asset, a powerful mercenary. In the grand scheme of things, they may have seemed a bit inconsequential, but they cut a sway through the galaxy, following the Jedi Purge, serving as symbols of terror alongside Vader, an extension of his power, although never coming close. Such a strong and feared organization initially seemed so crucial to the Empire's iron grip, but the shutting down of this group did make sense, and some Star Wars fans were not on board with the idea, saying they took away from the specialness and unique individual nature of the likes of Darth Vader and Darth Sidious. The red blade was meant to be special, not something which an entire group of ex-Jedi possessed. But I've got to say, I love the individuality of every single Inquisitor. Despite all playing very similar roles, no two are the same, and even though the Inquisitors aren't Sith, they sure do take after them in more ways than one. Most notable, which not many people talk about, is their struggle to work together. Several times throughout various media, Inquisitors have bickered, go against one another, and in a way, try to compete for Darth Vader's favour, to be the best of the group. For all of its flaws, this is one thing the Kenobi show did very well. In a sick and twisted way, this was intentional on the part of the Emperor. Both he and Darth Vader encouraged such competition, going as far as killing them if they formed a close bond. It was survival of the fittest, and in the end, they became a burden to Darth Vader, and we do see in the Kenobi show just how little patience Vader had for them. Vader never stopped seeing them as the Jedi they once were. In his eyes, they were pathetic. The training they endured was brutal, a process of breaking their autonomy and their will. Not to mention emotional torture. It wasn't uncommon for Vader to remove a body part just to torment them, to train their minds to become more attuned with the dark side, with their anger and insecurities. Victims of this included the sixth brother, who lost his lower arm, the ninth sister, who lost her left eye. It was a way that Vader taught them about loss, and to strip them of their defensive nature, to throw them into the deep end, so to speak. So while after Order 66, they were given the choice, die a Jedi or become an Inquisitor, the latter was no better, and sometimes worse, than death, as the Grand Inquisitor said in Star Wars Rebels. Do you want to see more of Marrok's backstory? And where would be the perfect place? If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. May the Force be with you, always.